Welcome to the Big Kickoff, your one-stop shop for tips and predictions from the Racing Post. I'm here with Mark Langdon and Joe Casey, and later we'll be hearing from Didi Hamann. Guys, how are we? Excited for the new season?
I am now. It took a little while.
Now you're here.
Yeah, it took a little while to recover from the Euros. I think it was obviously an exhausting tournament. Also, you know how it ended for England fans as well.
It didn't come home.
It didn't come home, and I think that we needed the break. But you know, the fact that fans are coming back just gives it that new sort of push, I think, now for the new season. Really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And let's have a little recap, a little reminisce on last season. I mean, Man City, they were kind of back to their old ways, showing everyone why they should be feared, right? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think the Premier League was sorted out quite early on last year. You know, Man City kind of cruised from... They did that thing sometimes where they just click into gear in like December time and then just cruise for the rest of the way. Obviously, Liverpool fell away massively from where they'd been the year before. And the teams that came up had such a hard time. You know, Fulham came up and had a couple of months to sort out their entire squad. And so the relegation got sorted pretty quickly. And so it kind of felt like it was a bit of a foregone conclusion. I know the top four race wasn't decided, but I'm looking forward to a bit more of a maybe competitive renewal this year, definitely.
Yeah, what about Chelsea though? Obviously Champions League winners. They were really impressive. Do you feel like they're going under the radar a little bit this season already? I
think they are. I mean, they are, you know, for the European champions, usually a team that's won the Champions League would be among the really sort of closer in the betting with Manchester City. The fact that, you know, Tuchel came in sort of January time rather than the summer, so there's not that hype around sort of a new manager. All the expenditure was last year as well, but I actually think that benefits Chelsea. You know, Tuchel's had sort of 6 months to work with the players. A lot of those foreign signings, I think, will be better in the second year. I think you've always got to allow some time, you know, for Havertz and Werner and Ziyech, players like that, you know, to just get their feet under the table. So I think that Chelsea, in my opinion, will be Manchester City's sort of closest challengers this year.
Me too. I feel like people aren't really kind of talking about them enough. And Joe, what about the recently promoted teams? I mean, who do you think might do the best out of them?
I think Brentford really, like, on the kind of underlying data, even though they came up through the playoffs last year, they were up there with much closer to Norwich and Watford than the league position ended up being. But I think they're set up to, almost in the way that Sheffield United did 2 years ago, Leeds did last year, kind of arrive with a bit of a bang.
Yeah.
And for me, I'd be a little bit worried if I was Norwich and Watford. I know with Norwich, their system or the way they have set up that team is kind of, relegation isn't the end of the world. You know, they don't overspend, they don't throw money about. So they have a lot of young players coming through and they have a system where they can go through relegation and then bounce back. But Watford, I'd be very concerned about. Just wasn't convinced by them last year necessarily. I think they sort of maybe got away with one a little bit. They were the lowest scoring team to come up since Huddersfield in 2016-17. So, yeah, they would be the team I'd be most concerned about if I was a Watford fan.
OK, Mark, you touched upon Euro 2020. I mean, some brilliant games, right? Some great football. Were there any particular players from the Premier League that really stood out for you?
I think in terms of the Premier League, I mean, I'll go for a fairly obvious one in Raheem Sterling, because I was one of the many England fans going, he shouldn't be starting.
Really?
Yeah.
You were one of them?
I don't mind. I'll admit to it now. I would have gone with a different front three. I think that there was, you know, I would have gone Foden, and that there was Sancho, you know, the Grealish. There were other options there that I felt were in better form than Raheem Sterling. And, you know, he lost his way a little bit, I think, in the Premier League team. Yeah. And now you're wondering where he fits in at Manchester City, because he should be playing. He deserves to be playing. I don't think he'll be happy if he sat on the bench again. You know, I know he played in the Champions League final, but he missed a lot of the season. I think another one was Jorginho in midfield for Italy and for Chelsea. Just ran the show.
Does it hurt you saying that?
Do you know what? It doesn't, because I'll admit to getting Raheem Sterling wrong. But when Chelsea fans were booing Jorginho, if you remember when he first came and he was seen as sort of teacher's pet with Maurizio Sarri, I thought it was just bang out of order. You know, it wasn't his fault that the Sarri's team wasn't playing quite how they wanted. And he's a quality performer. The other one is Paul Pogba, who played, I thought, fantastically well for France. We don't see that Pogba in a United shirt too often, I think it's fair to say.
Why is that?
I think he feels loved with France. Like Deschamps has clearly got a better relationship with him than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has had at Manchester United, and I think France trust him to play in a deeper position, and Ole doesn't. Ole's played him quite often out wide on the left, or he's been on the right. I think you've got to accept that he will make mistakes and he will give the ball away occasionally, as he did when Switzerland scored that third goal. But what you get from him are those through balls and passes and dictating of play that few players can match.
And Joe, how does a summer competition like the Euros affect your predictions going into the new season?
Well, obviously, even more so this season rather than any other, because such a full-on relentless season last time out, and then you had not just the Euros but Copa America. So like Manchester City had 60 something players who played at either the Euros or the Copa America. So it's no one's going to be up to full scratch straight away, and it's going to take a couple of weeks to bed in for teams to get back to full fitness and get back to where they want to be. And I think it'll give an advantage to teams who've had like a full summer to work together, and I think it'll definitely make it more interesting early doors.
Yep, and Mark, look, we've got to talk about Harry Kane. If we're moving into this season now, I mean, at the time of recording, we know he recently didn't turn up for training. There was a lot of talk over the summer about whether he would kind of have the guts to do that, to try and force a move. It looks like that's happening.
He's got the guts to do it. I'm not sure it's the wisest move, because if you want to get a transfer, I wouldn't have thought sort of annoying Daniel Levy was the way to go about that. I suppose he may feel that was his only move. I tend to disagree. I think that, and Jamie Carragher has sort of been tweeting about this, that sort of he's now risking sort of ruining that sort of legacy and relationship he's got with the Spurs fans, which has been a very strong bond. But ultimately, unless Man City pay proper money for him, like Tottenham can't sell him, even if they've got this sort of agreement in place. Because if we're in a summer when Ben White is 50 million and Grealish is 100 million, then Harry Kane has to be in excess of 120, because he's a 3-time Golden Boot winner. He was the top assist maker last year. He's won a World Cup Golden Boot. He's the England captain. Man City have paid sort of 50 million for fullbacks and not blinked. So I think it's up to City to come up with an offer that sort of matches the level that Kane's playing at.
Yeah, and also another one being linked to Manchester City, of course, Jack Grealish. I mean, do we think that's going to happen?
I think it would be a shame if it did. I think, he's obviously boyhood club is such a talisman for them. Yeah. And, he's a great player to watch in his pomp, and you worry that in a City team he would maybe be, less of a shining star when you've got Foden, Sterling, Gundogan. He's going to be one of many, whereas it's enjoyable to see him now as the main attraction, the star of the show. So I think, but the problem is money talks, and the one thing that does make it seem likely is Villa seem to be spending money or throwing money about as if he's gone, and as if he's, the money they've spent so far, Buendia would be a good replacement, and it does seem that they're leaning that way, definitely.
Oh, Villa fans would be gutted though, wouldn't they? So
I think the league will. I mean, the league should be gutted if the team that's just romped to the title buys Grealish and Kane. I mean, where does that leave?
Do we just stop it here?
So I mean, I think they're. It's people go on about the Premier League and how competitive it is. I think it'll be a struggle if they get them for Liverpool and everybody else to just keep tabs.
Absolutely, and we've of course seen some new managers coming in. I mean, Spurs had a very public search for their new manager. They've got Nuno Espirito Santo. We've obviously got probably the most controversial one in Rafa Benitez to Everton. How do you see that one panning out?
I love Rafa. I think he's
a Newcastle.
Yeah, as a Newcastle fan, I have to love Rafa. Obviously, massively controversial. Everton fans seriously not happy with it. But I think one of their problems last year was just too weak at the back. And if you want a manager to sort it out, Rafa is the man. And there's young defenders there, Godfrey, that he can work with and build into a proper. And I think as well, Calvert-Lewin is an ideal Rafa striker. Physical, will do the defensive work, can play up there on his own. Like, I think the problem is the style of football will not be what Everton fans want, and that could cause even more issues. Yeah. But I think he'll get results. Like, he loves working with his back against the wall. Like, every job he goes to, he seems to just fall out with the owner, fall out with the fans, but he does get results, and like, he's so good defensively. I think he can definitely sort Everton out.
Yeah, we will see. But it's not been the most incredible transfer window, I think it's fair to say. What's kind of stood out for you the most, Mark?
No, I think it was a lot of money, Ben White. I think Arsenal have overpaid, the 50 million. But I thought it was a really interesting signing that Arsenal have kind of gone, right, he's the guy that we think can sort of play the Arteta football out of the back, but can also probably grow into being their sort of leader at the back over the next 5 or 6 years. I don't think it's a signing, just
right
for August.
Yeah.
This is somebody that they're banking on, really improving and, being able to play the way that Arteta wants them to. And it's so important to have the right defenders. We've seen that with Manchester City and with Liverpool the last 2 years when they weren't right at the back. They had everything else in place, and yet they were nowhere near winning the title because that centre-back wasn't right. So, I mean, Ben White was somebody I really liked at Leeds, and so to see how he develops at Arsenal and whether he sort of lives up to that, being their Van Dijk or their Dias, and he's not at that level yet, but whether he can kind of grow into it, that's what I'm most looking forward to seeing, I think, from the new arrivals.
And of course, if there is one area that Arsenal definitely needs to strengthen, it is at the back. I think it's fair to say. Right, let's get into your predictions and tips. So, the big one. Who is going to win the Premier League? That's easy, isn't it?
It is for me, yeah. I mean, I think Man City will win. They were well clear last year. I don't see any reason for them to suddenly go backwards. I expect them to get at least one of Grealish or Kane, and if they get both, as I said before, I think that will become really difficult. They're strong at the back. They absolutely dominate in midfield, and they've got so many sort of forward options that they haven't got Kane at the moment. So you say that maybe they lack that real sort of 25 goal a season person, but they've got a lot of people that are going to get 10, 12 goals, and I just think that they control the game so well. I think Chelsea will be their closest challengers.
Not Liverpool?
No, I just wonder with Liverpool. I think Liverpool have got like their defenders back, which is obviously a big part for them, but their midfield looks a bit thin. It's quality, but it looks a bit thin. And up front, they've got the 4 options, 2 of which will be off at the Africa Cup of Nations, Mane and Salah, for a little while. It wouldn't overly impact, but we've seen like last season, that squad, once we got past the initial 11, they struggled, and I think that there'll be a similar story again.
Okay, interesting. Joe, are you agreeing? Man City, is it easy for you?
Yeah, I think it's hard to look past City. They won the league last year without a striker, basically, and they're going to try, presumably, I mean, if they get Kane, they'll get the best striker in the league. Like, it's hard to see past them. I think even the whole top 4 in general, like, aside from City, you have 2 of the last 3 Champions League winners, and then you have Man United, who've brought in Jadon Sancho, Varane, on top of an already very strong team. So for me, the top 4 are quite far clear of the rest. But City at the head, and I think going back to what Mark said about Liverpool, they've really rested on their laurels. If you look at the amount of money that Chelsea have spent, that City have spent, that Man U have spent in the last 2-3 seasons, they've just sat back and watched others progress past them. And I think that's a real shame because, Liverpool, when it was Liverpool City as the kind of big 2, they were such a great team to watch in their kind of pomp. And I feel like that expectation for Harvey Elliott, for Curtis Jones to step up, it's a lot of pressure on them, and they've really been let down by the owners, I guess.
I think one of the things for Liverpool is that Klopp did such a great job last year, because the owners will think, well, you can do that again because you took out all of them players that they were missing, and he still finished in the top 4. That will be their main aim, to make sure they're in that top 4 again. Sure, they'd like to win the league, but they don't appear to have the financial clout of the other 3 at the moment. And Klopp's so good in one way, it's his problem because they just think he can kind of work the miracles. And I think you can do it once or twice, but it's hard to keep going back to that well.
To sustain it, I guess. Joe, you touched upon it there. So who is your top 4 then?
So I'm going to go City, obviously. But I do think at the price is Man United potentially, because they've obviously added the one thing. I think if Man U had a different manager, they'd be almost half the price that they are. And that's brutal, but Solskjaer, I don't think is at the level of Tuchel and Klopp and Guardiola. And they've added Varane, which is obviously for so long they've been crying out for someone alongside Maguire, who is at that world-class level. Lindelof's a very good player, but he's not quite at that level. They've also added Sancho, who completely flew under the radar in this country because he plays in Germany. He played in Germany, but his numbers for the last 3 seasons have been outrageously good.
Yeah.
And if he can even bring half of that numbers over to the Premier League, I think they are going to be a really, really strong contender this year. But I just think, their noisy neighbours are going to be too good.
Mark, your top 4.
Yeah, I'll go City 1, Chelsea 2, Liverpool 3, United 4. Agree with Joe that I'd probably have United higher up if they had a different manager.
Okay, who do you think could sneak into Europe then?
Well, I suppose sneak's the wrong word in some respects, because Leicester have kind of broken that big 6 and top 6 mentality. Last 2 years they've been in the top 6 and they've been knocking on the door of Champions League. Missed out on the last day on 2 occasions. They've won the FA Cup. They've actually won the league a lot more recently than say Arsenal and particularly Tottenham. So. Yet the bookmakers don't seem to yet fully appreciate the fact that Leicester are sort of, it's now probably a big 7 if you like, or almost like a big 4 and then another 3 around them. And I think that Leicester are as good as Tottenham and Arsenal, and so I would go for them to finish 5th, I think. And I would also go, I think Arsenal have a better season.
Do you think? Is that because of the lack of European football?
No European football one. I think Ben White, although expensive, improves them at centre-back. Expect more from Kieran Tierney and Thomas Partey in their second seasons in North London. I would say the same for Pepe in terms of the way he finished last year, gave a good impression. I think Martinelli is a really progressive young wide player. Smith Rowe, another one that I like the look of. And Aubameyang can't be as bad. He surely can't be as bad. To go from what he did in terms of really pushing for the golden boot to just being this peripheral figure. And I don't think it was a new contract. I just think he just had a mare of a season.
Confidence lacking, maybe.
And the team didn't play particularly well, did they? And so I think that Arsenal will be in the top 6 as well.
Yeah, and Joe, who for you maybe wiggles their way into Europe?
I think Leicester, like Mark said. I think of all the teams in the Premier League so far this season, obviously the transfer window has been a bit of a funny one. But Leicester have had the best one so far, I think. They got Samare from Lille, who obviously won the league in France last year. They got Ryan Bertrand, which is a transfer that's probably going to fly under the radar a little bit, but I think that's just a really solid addition to the squad. And then Daka, the new striker, scored an outrageous number of goals in Austria last year. Obviously, some people will say that's nowhere near the standard of the Premier League, but between him, Iheanacho, Vardy, they're going to share the load around. And yeah, they're definitely a team that will be up there fighting, I think. What would worry you a little bit about them is the way that they've faded the last 2 seasons. They've been in Champions League spots throughout the season and then kind of got to the later stages and fallen away. So that would play in your mind, but I do think they're in a stronger position than the 2 North London clubs probably.
And looking at top scorers then, who would be your tip?
Well, I mean, obviously Harry Kane is the obvious one. I suppose you just wonder though with Kane, if he stays at Tottenham, what's that relationship like and when does he actually start? Because if he's not training at the moment, it's going to be a few weeks before he'd be able to start. So he's giving up a bit of minutes. He's also had his injuries. And if he goes to City, you would expect him to score a bucket load. But Pep does rotate his forwards and midfielders around a lot, and so at Tottenham he can basically play whenever he wants, and he did in sort of cup finals when he wasn't fit. It won't be like that at City, and then what happens if it doesn't quite work out for him?
Yeah.
So I would avoid him for the time being. I'm going to go for 3 outsiders. One of them, Kevin De Bruyne, on the hope that Kane doesn't go to City, and he actually played up front a lot for them, and he did for Belgium as well. He's one outsider. Kai Havertz would be another outsider because again, Chelsea haven't strengthened in that centre forward position, and Havertz played a lot up front, under Tuchel, and then a more traditional centre forward, if you like, Edinson Cavani, a great first year at United, well deserved his new contract. He won't play every week, but I think he'll play in enough games to give you a good run for your money, and they're all between like 40 and 66 to 1.
Yeah, okay. And of course, like you said, I mean, Harry Kane is kind of an obvious choice, but if he does go to City, he maybe need a bit of time to settle in as well.
I just think, I think as a favourite, you just want more knowns. I think you need more certainty about just everything. Like, his environment at Spurs, you've known for the last 5 years, like how he's going to play and what they're going to do. And he's always been up there. It just makes me nervous. The one good point that a colleague, Simon Giles, has made in the Racing Post Big Kickoff is that City get a lot of penalties. And if Kane goes, he'll be banging them in. If he doesn't, which is one of the reasons for De Bruyne, he's somebody that takes a lot of their penalties.
Okay, Joe, what about you for top scorers?
Again, like Mark was saying, I think there's some question marks at the front of the market. Salah didn't probably quite live up to his previous seasons last year, and so I've gone for a little bit of an outsider. Ivan Toney. Bamford kind of ran into a place in this market last year at a big old price, promoted team, scored a lot of penalties, and this is kind of a similar mould. He scored 31 in the Championship last year, 11 penalties, I think, so, he's one of those players that the team at Brentford, the goal scoring ability he has, the team is sort of built around him or built to maximise his goal potential. So I think, away from the obvious ones, he's someone that could definitely, if you're getting 4 places each way, he could definitely put a good run for his money, yeah, definitely.
Okay, and at the other end of the table, relegation, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that the promoted teams will do better than the odds are suggesting. I agree that I think Brentford have got the ability to stay up. The one thing that would make me nervous about them is the way that they play. What happens if they lose a lot of games? Can they maintain that confidence to be able to continue and play at that ability? But I think Norwich have made... Their squad looks a bit thin, but I think they've made some good signings to replace, obviously, Buendia that left. I also would say with Norwich, they were good champions last year, deserve to go up. Watford seem to be a big negative around Watford at the moment, but the Pozzo family, they make a lot of signings, and I don't think they're done. So I'll judge them maybe at the end of the season. But I think it does leave some of the kind of traditional strugglers in more danger, because I expect a competitive league at least, and Burnley would be the ones. Only brought in one player as we speak in terms of to strengthen the starting 11, but does Collins even do that? I'm not sure. So maybe they haven't actually strengthened their starting 11. I think that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
Dyche is in the last year of his contract. He gets the absolute maximum out of those players every single week. That needs a lot of buy-in. And if you're a player in that dressing room thinking, well, you're not signed a new contract, do I really want to be running through walls for you if you're not doing that? I would just have a slight doubt there that all's not well. So Burnley, who rely on, all of those kind of Sean Dyche qualities, if it doesn't work, they're in trouble.
Yeah, and they of course struggled last season. We know they did. Joe, is it similar for you?
Yeah, definitely Burnley. Scored 33 goals last year. Only West Brom, Sheffield United scored less than that. And Chris Wood and Vidra were a huge part in that. If Chris Wood goes down injured, first game of the season, you really worry about where the goals are going to come from. They also had a takeover at the back end of last year that I feel like kind of slipped under the radar a little bit, but it was very controversial. It's kind of not necessarily a positive, I don't think. They definitely haven't put the money in that they you would assume with new owners. They bought in Collins from Stoke, but they sold Gibson, so there wasn't actually that much of an outlay there. And they just are so, like, after the first 11, the strength in depth is just... And there was a couple of times last year where Dyche was purposely not bringing on players to emphasise to the owners how weak his squad was. You know, there's a couple of times where he only made one sub or no subs in a game, and that doesn't scream a happy home, you know. I really would be concerned for Burnley this season.
Okay, and any other Premier League bets that could be of interest?
I think in terms of the sack race, I suppose, you know, I quite like, that's probably the wrong word, isn't it, when you're saying somebody's going to get sacked. But I think Dean Smith would be, you know, a runner in that market, because I think expectations have risen at Aston Villa, and rightly so. I mean, they had a good year last year, and they've got very ambitious owners. But Jack Grealish was such a big part of what they did. Even if you replace him with 3 players, it doesn't mean you'll be any better, or at least it doesn't mean you'll be any better quickly. And of course, we know with the sack race, it's who starts poorly. And Villa have got quite an easy start on paper, but I think that in some ways can actually increase pressure, because if you don't get those wins against the likes of Brentford, then all of a sudden, you know, you're under it. So he's obviously a local lad, done well. I think the fans quite like Dean Smith, but at the same time, I don't think the owners will be that fussed if they have to, you know, if they have to make a decision there.
Okay, Joe, what about you?
I've touched on it a little bit earlier, but Watford, lowest scoring team for me. They only got 63 goals in the Championship last year, touched on that. Brentford got 79, and so there's clearly a bit of a gulf there in terms of goal scoring. And with Norwich and Brentford, they have like a clear number 9, Pukki, Tony, both scored a hatful of goals in the Championship last year. So they have like a focal point where you know where the goals are going to come from. Watford have kind of 7 or 8 first-team strikers who would all have decent shouts at starting. Brought in Josh King, who didn't score a single goal last season, in spells at Bournemouth and Everton. I struggle to see where the goals are going to come from with them. And just on the sack race, touching on bringing it back to Burnley, Dyche, I worry, like you said, he's in the last year of his contract.
Yeah.
If, you know, Dwight McNeil's been linked with a lot of other teams, if he were to go, I think Dyche would say, you know, this is enough. The squad hasn't been supported for how many years? How many times can they keep going to the well without improving the squad? And he keeps them up without him just getting fed up.
I've got one more.
Go on.
We haven't put enough out there, have we? Brighton on the handicap. I thought that Brighton last season, and I know that all the stats guys just loved them because they put up these sort of expected goals numbers that were off the scale, like sort of, you know, top 6 in expected goals, touches in the opponent's penalty box. They just couldn't score their chances. I don't think they can be that unlucky again. I don't think that Mopé is actually as bad as what he was last season. So I don't think it will take much for Brighton, even though they've lost Ben White, because they've actually got some decent defenders anyway. I think that they can invest that money going further forward. Lamptey's will be back from injury. I think that Brighton could be pushing top 10, and if they do, that makes them a shout on the handicap. They're my sort of surprise package.
Top 10, I mean, that surprised me. To be fair. Right, you've heard from our experts, Mark and Joe, but let's hear the thoughts of Didi Hamann ahead of the new season. Didi, thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, how are you? You must be really excited for the new Premier League season.
Yeah, hi Nicole. Yeah, of course I'm excited. I think we had a great tournament in the Euros. But the domestic league is always very exciting. I think we've got a pretty open title race again this season, and I think I'm looking forward as much as everybody else does in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of your former teams, Liverpool and Manchester City, we know how good they are. What do you think they're going to do this season?
Well, City are short price favourites, and I'm not sure whether I would get involved at a price. I think they're around about 4 to 6. They lost the Champions League final. I feel they lost because the manager picked a very strange formation. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the players would have spoken about it after the game or even now in pre-season, that they missed a golden opportunity against a team that I think finished 20-odd points behind them in the league. and he decided to play without a holding midfielder. And I think there might have been some damage done between players and coach. So at 4-6 wouldn't be for me. I think Liverpool got a very good chance. They finished third last year, and they mostly played without centre backs for the whole season. Van Dijk's been out for most of the season. Gomez been out. Matip's been out. So these guys are back now, and I think at the prices, I would rather go for Liverpool than for Manchester City.
Oh, so you think that Liverpool are going to win the league then? I'm going to put you on the spot. You think that they are going to come top?
Well, I think if you back them each way, you've got a free bet at 4-1, 9-2. I think you've got a free bet if you've got three places. I can't see them finishing outside the top three. They finished third last year. As I said, playing most of the season without a centre-back. They brought a very good player in Konate. And I just can't see them not competing. I think with 4 or 5 games to go, I think they will still have a chance to win the league. And I think they've got a very good chance. Whether they win it, I don't know. But I think they've got a better chance than some people might give them.
Interesting. I mean, like you said earlier, at the top, it's going to be a tough battle because obviously Liverpool are great, Manchester City, but Chelsea have been very impressive, Man United, and they've obviously made some great signings in Jadon Sancho Varane as well. So it could be really competitive. Who do you think will be in the top 4?
Well, I think Leicester got a good chance. I think they proved in the last few years that they can compete with the best teams, even though they missed, I think, both seasons, the last 2 seasons. They missed out on the last day of the season. It looked like 2 years ago they are pretty much certain to finish in the top 4, and they didn't. But I think it's a team that's improved every year. So I think Leicester would be my outside pick. I really do like them. Manchester City, Liverpool will finish in the top 4, and then it's either Manchester United or Chelsea. Manchester United signed some good players. Yes, you're right. But I just don't really see things growing. I think they're huffing and puffing. I don't think there's a position or 2 positions where I say if they get 1 or 2 players here, they really compete for the title. I don't see them being that united and that together as you have to be to win the league. And as for Chelsea, yes, they improved under Tuchel, even though they need a slip-up of Leicester on the last day of the season to qualify for the Champions League. Lost the FA Cup final. Of course, we saw what they did in the Champions League final. They can be a formidable team. They're still pretty young, but I just think they're too short. They finished behind Liverpool last season. Liverpool got all the players back. So, I think Liverpool got a far better chance than them. So who's going to miss out? I think it'll be either Chelsea or Man United.
Oh, it's so tough to predict, isn't it? Because there are so many great teams right now. Who do you think will be the top scorer in the Premier League this season then?
Well, if you look at Liverpool's setup, when your defense is weakened, I think it also affects your play going forward. And I think they were very wasteful in front of goal last season, Liverpool. But I think Salah, I think he's got 20 plus goals every season. There's a huge question mark what's happening with Harry Kane. If he were to leave Tottenham, I think there's a good chance he'll miss a few games, whether he stays at Spurs. He never showed up for trade, whether he stays at Spurs or goes to Manchester City. So I think there's a good chance he'll miss the first few games. So I'll probably go with Salah because I think you've got a player who gives you a run for your money. He's usually deadly in front of goal, even though he's been pretty wasteful last season. I would go with Mo Salah.
And who do you think will be relegated then? Obviously, that's always a tough one to predict.
Yeah, it is. I think the teams I've been looking at bigger prices, there's 2 teams actually. I don't see Newcastle being as big as they are. They had trouble off the field for the last couple of years now. I don't think that's going to change. I think they're around about 11-4. So I think Newcastle will be a team that's too big. And the other one is Aston Villa. I think Aston Villa played a fantastic season. Last year, they, I think they were top of the league after 5 or 6 games. So pretty much by October or November, they were safe because they already had 20 odd points. So they needed only another 3 or 4 wins for the whole of the season. They ended up on, I think, 52 or 55 points, which was a tremendous return for their team. But But I think there's a big question mark whether Grealish is going to stay. If Grealish were to move, of course he will get a lot of money. Do they get players or the players they want late in the transfer window, and for what price do they get them? So I think a lot depends on whether Grealish stays, and I would take a speculative punt on Villa at 6 or 7 to 1, because I think if Grealish were to go and were to leave Aston Villa, I think they're probably half in price.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, what about, just quickly, the teams that are obviously promoted from the Championship? Obviously, Watford, Norwich, they have Premier League experience. Then you've got Brentford.
Yeah, it's always tough, but I think what we saw in the last few years, sometimes it's easier to stay up. I think we saw with Sheffield United, nobody gave them a chance. It did stay up, went down the next season. So I think the second season, obviously, you have to survive the first one to get a second season. But sometimes I think the first year they've got a better chance because they fly under the radar. The other teams don't know them. They strengthen their teams as well. I think, especially Norwich, I think brought a couple of very good players in. And I give them all a chance. And of course, the obvious ones and the favourites to go down are the promoted sides. But I think all three stand a chance. It's probably unlikely that all three stay up, but I wouldn't bet against it.
Okay, and let's talk European football, the Champions League. Who are you backing for that?
Well, I think the English teams really dominated European football in the last few years, and I think it would be daft to look anywhere else by England. Bayern Munich haven't really strengthened. I think Bayern Munich is a big lay this season because they lost a lot of money due to the situation we're in. So I would leave the German teams well alone. Not too sure about Juventus. It's still not sure whether Ronaldo's going to stay. So if you look at the English teams, Manchester City had a golden opportunity last season and they didn't take it. I'm not sure they get another one. I'm not sure they get a better one. So I probably would go with either Liverpool or Man United, because Man United, as I said, I think on their day, I think they can be as good as anybody. I don't think they've got a consistency to compete for 38 games. But I think it's a team that's proved in the last few years. They won the Europa League, even though they lost their final last season. I think Manchester United is a team with Sancho and Varane now that could go deep in that competition.
You don't think Chelsea could do it again?
Of course they can, but I think we had a situation about 8 or 9 years ago where for 25 years no team defended their title. I think Real Madrid did it 3 or 4 times in a row. Then I don't think it's been done since. It's a very hard thing to do, and I think they had the breaks at the right time, had a bit of luck with a draw, and obviously again I think Guardiola did them a favour by not playing Rodri in the final. So they had their Christmas last season. I doubt it'll be another one for them this season.
Okay, and do you think, lastly, that there'll be any surprises across the European leagues? Anyone that will surprise us this season?
Well, I think Bayern Munich is too short, as I just alluded to. They lost in Alaba and Boateng. They lost their central partnership, defensive partnership. They both went on a free. They brought Upamecano in from Leipzig, a young player, very good player, but he still makes a few mistakes. And if you lose so much experience, Martinez left as well. They lost 3 players who've been at the club pretty much for the last 10, 12 years. I think it's very hard to compensate that. And Bayern Munich, I think they're about 6 on to win the league. I think it's far too short. I think there will be a time in this season where you get 2s on, where maybe even get even money. They've got a new manager as well. They've got a new CEO. So there's a lot of change in Munich. And as I said, they haven't got the financial power to compete with English teams. A couple of very good players are out of contract next summer. So I think there'll be a lot of talk and a lot of rumours going on from the start of the season if they don't extend these contracts. So I think Bayern Munich has a tough season ahead of them. And I think they're late.
Okay, brilliant. Great insight there. Thank you so much, Didi. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you, Nicole. Bye-bye.
So from a Champions League winner to Champions League winners, who do we think then could do it this season, Mark?
Well, I'm a little bit surprised Didi sort of so bullish on Manchester United, because I think that Ollie would be my question mark there, really. I mean, yeah, he's done okay, I suppose, in some of the bigger games, but I still would rather have a Pep, Klopp or Tuchel on my side. Yeah. The English teams are strong, and I think that you could make a case for all of them, really. I'm actually going to go for a sort of almost a fallen giant, if you like. But Barcelona have taken a real tumble in terms of the odds, because they're out to like 16, 18 to 1 now. And yes, they've got problems, and they're well documented, their problems. But I'm looking at their team, I'm thinking, it wouldn't amaze me if they sort of were in the Champions League quarterfinals. And then from there, we've seen it time and time again. It's a different story. What we're talking about in August, just doesn't apply, because it's February, March time, and things change. But I look at that team and I think ter Stegen in goal, yeah, really good. You look at the sort of Eric Garcia, Pedri, who was fantastic at the Euros, Busquets, Alba. They were all part of a Spanish team that will feel unlucky they didn't win the European Championship. That wasn't that long ago. Messi's just won the Copa America with Argentina. He's been showing pictures on Instagram with his top off. He never looked so good. I know he's reaching sort of veteran status, but he doesn't look like
age.
He doesn't age. And then I'm going, well, Memphis Depay, fantastic player. They've still got Griezmann. They've still got Dembele. Ansu Fati is one of the really highly regarded sort of youngsters in European football. So they've got issues, and we don't know exactly how many of those players will all start the season and finish the season at Barcelona. But I still think that with Aguero maybe off the bench as well, they would be my sort of. It feels weird calling them outsiders or dark horses because of where they've been, but that's their kind of status now. And I'd be prepared to give any team that's got sort of Messi in it a chance at those kind of prices.
I think I'd say that's fair enough. Joe, Didi obviously doesn't really think that Chelsea could do it again. Do you see that differently?
Yeah, I think Chelsea did kind of get away with one a little bit. Although, to be fair, they kind of just did a job on City in the final. They set up defensively, big mistake by City, and then scored the goal and sat in, and that they executed their game plan to perfection. I think all the English teams, like Mark said, have a great shout. I was going through the last 6 Champions League finalists. 4 of them are English, so obviously there's a lot of top level European competition pedigree there. The one that I would be interested in away from the English teams will be Bayern. I think they kind of got away. But PSG got away with one a bit when they turned them over last year. And they've got some great young players coming through. Masala, Davies, they're getting Upkamenko in at the back. And then you've obviously got that core, Neuer, Kimmich, Lewandowski up top. Like, they have a very solid team. And, they've proved time and time again that they can't be written off. So, yeah, I would be sweet on Bayern Munich.
Yeah. What about the Europa League then?
The easiest place to start with this is Spain. 7 of the last 10 winners have been sort of teams from La Liga, and even going back further than that, you remember like sort of smaller teams, if you like. Alaves reached the final. Espanyol have won it. Like it matters to the. I think that counts. It really means something. Villarreal, when they played against Manchester United, you could tell that meant more to them than what it did to Manchester United in the final, and so. I'm going to go for that. I just was like, right, what Spanish teams are in it? And Real Sociedad, who actually, Ishak was somebody that at the Euros looked good up front. I felt for them. David Silva's reaching veteran status, but I think can still, pull the strings. They were on sort of the underlying sort of metrics, one of the best teams in Spain last season outside of the sort of top 2. I think they finished 3rd on expected goals. They were absolutely pummeled by Manchester United in the Europa League. There's no real quality in it, I don't feel, this season. We don't know who's dropping in from the Champions League at this stage, but as it stands, I'd say that they're as sort of really as good as anyone in it.
Yeah, Joe, what about you? What about the English sides as well?
Well, this is what I was going to come on to. I quite fancy Leicester.
Do you? Well, yeah, that's fair.
I think, obviously, they've got the kind of monkey off their back last year winning the FA Cup. And Rodgers has, throughout his managerial career, has never really had a good European run. Even when he was at Celtic, Liverpool didn't kind of have that long run through the European competitions. So I feel like he'll be kind of, they've won the title, they've won the FA Cup now. It's almost like, what's the next big thing that they can do? And that's do well in Europe. And, we talked about it earlier, the additions that they've made to that squad have been really solid, and it's a lot deeper than it was previously. They've got a lot of young players, Fofana at the back. Tielemans is only 24, I think, because he's been around for quite a long time.
I was literally just like...
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? But he is obviously pulling the strings in midfield. I think they've got a really good chance. And like with the Europa Conference League coming in this season, it has sort of thinned out the quality of the Europa League a bit. So yeah, I think they've got a great shout.
Yeah, speaking of the Europa Conference League, obviously it is the first season of it. What are we thinking about that, Mark?
I mean, it's...
Are you looking forward to it?
Not overly.
No.
I feel that it probably has done its job in terms of thinning out the Europa League, because people looked at that Europa League and were like, oh, this is a slog. And now there aren't as many qualifying rounds for most of the teams. What it does mean, though, is that, say, Tottenham and Roma are the two biggest teams in the Conference League, almost being sort of cut adrift and have been denied an opportunity to win the Europa League that then gives them an entrance into the Champions League. So I don't expect sort of the big teams to take it particularly seriously until we reach the latter stages. But we do know Jose Mourinho likes to win trophies, and I think he will, once they get to the knockout stage, he will prioritise that. I mean, if they avoid each other, it should be a Roma v Spurs final, and I think Mourinho would quite like to beat Tottenham, given he was sat by them on the eve of the cup final last season.
I feel like it might be one of those where the teams sort of don't, and fans don't really care that much throughout the season, but obviously the further they get into it,
absolutely,
suddenly everyone's number one Europa Conference League fan, right?
Exactly.
What about La Liga then? Any tips for that, Joe?
Well, touched on it earlier, Real Sociedad to finish in the top four. I think they have a really good young squad. Mikel Merino, who was at Newcastle, is a great player. Arazabal, probably butchered that, but who played really well for Spain at the Euros, and Ishak, who was obviously a big player for Sweden. I think they have the squad definitely to push on, and there's question marks obviously with all the financial difficulties about the big guns. So I think Real Sociedad definitely would be my selection in Spain.
I think that in the title race, I'm struggling. I mean, I've mentioned Barcelona for the Champions League, but they're a lot bigger price to win that than they are La Liga, and I think you can take a chance at bigger odds. I'm not sure I want to be taking a chance at sort of the shorter prices. I think I wasn't massively impressed with Atletico last year, despite them winning La Liga. They got a lot of late goals. Luis Suarez is another year older. I don't feel like they've quite made enough signings yet. And Real Madrid, I mean, Ancelotti's record in the Champions League is very good. His record in league championship fights, if you like, not so good. Even when he's been at really big clubs, hasn't done that well. I'm avoiding the title race. I'm also going in the top four. I'm hoping Joe's wrong, because I'm hoping Sociedad put all their eggs into the Europa League basket. And I think that Sevilla are still strong enough to finish in the top four. They've lost a couple of players, but I always back Monchi, the sporting director, to be able to replace them. And as long as he's around, I think they'll be top four.
Okay, what about Serie A then? What's your best bet for that, Joe?
Juventus just didn't convince at all last year, obviously finishing fourth, a huge kind of fall away from them. And they haven't done anything really. I guess a lot of their players had good Euros, but as a club, I think it's strange to say, but signing Ronaldo, they may look back on in 10 years' time and say that was a bad idea. The cohesion, I think he was top scorer almost in Italy last year, but in terms of the cohesion of the team, I don't feel like he's brought anything to that side.
Okay.
And one team who I think are quite a cohesive team and at a bigger price is Atalanta. They had so many players at the Euros who impressed. Marla, Denmark, Malinowski at Ukraine, Toloi. It looks like they might lose Romero to Spurs, but then they've got £50 million burning a hole in their back pocket to go out and reinvest. So I think with question marks about Inter as well, can they go again? Can they, repeat what they did last year? and obviously Juve, wouldn't want to be with them at such a short price. So yeah, Atalanta for me.
Surely Inter have got to be favourites, no?
No, well, I think losing Conte is such a blow. Now, financially, they were said to be in big trouble, but it was like, will they lose Lukaku? Will they lose Lautaro Martinez? And they still might, of course. We're still a couple of weeks away. But actually, they've got a lot of their money back by selling a right wing back in Hakimi to Paris Saint-Germain, who is a really good player, but you fancy your chances of being able to replace a right wing back than you would like Lukaku. So I would prefer Inter to Juventus. I have to say, I think that Simone Inzaghi is not as good as Conte, but still, I think did a good job with Lazio. But I agree with Joe. I think there's going to be an upset here. I think Atalanta are being massively underrated. Probably got a really progressive coach in Gasperini, and they are the best recruiters in Italy. And so if you give them 50 million, that it looks like Tottenham are going to do for Romero, you've got to remember they bought him they got him on loan with an option to buy for 15. That's how good they are, and they can improve players out of all recognition. So I think 50 million enables them to really improve. They've got a very strong forward line, and I see no reason really why they can't be pushing the kind of bigger teams on a really consistent basis this season.
Okay, what about the Bundesliga? Any surprises there then that we might see, Joe?
No.
No,
not particularly. I think, Bayern are so short, but I'd go without Bayern, Dortmund. I think it's basically almost a match bet between them and Leipzig. And Leipzig have obviously lost their coach. They've lost their 2 centre-halves. And they've spent quite a bit of money in kind of trying to replace those. But I would worry that to go through such a major change kind of will upset the apple cart a little bit. And I think Dortmund keeping Haaland is huge. And he's going to be motivated to have a big season if he is to move on at the end of the year, to put himself in the shop window. I mean, everyone knows how good he is, how, much he can do. But losing Sancho is a little bit, of a tricky point, but they signed Marlon, who can take maybe a bit of the goal-scoring weight from Haaland. And so, without Bayern Munich, I'd go for Dortmund.
Mark?
Exactly the same. We're agreeing quite a bit on these European ones. But
isn't this nice?
I agree, really. I think that Marlon's a really good signing. He was obviously at Arsenal as a young player. He went to the Eredivisie. He's done well in Holland. People have this negative sort of vibe about the Eredivisie because Afonso Alves came out of it, Vincent Janssen. There's been some real flops, but there's also where Van Persie, Luis Suarez, Van Nistelrooy, Memphis Depay, they're not all bad. It's just because some of the forwards come out of there are no good doesn't mean they all are. He's not going to be as good as Sancho yet, but I think it's a really good signing, and I think Marco Rosa, the coach, is an upgrade on what they had last year. So I would be surprised if Dortmund didn't finish second to Bayern Munich.
Okay, and Ligue, what's your best bet for that?
Again, the PSG additions this year has been, they're really going for it. They're obviously not happy with not getting over the line in either the League or the Champions League. And so they've, gone out of their way to sign as many kind of big names as they can. So, they're obviously too short to fancy for the League. But without them, we'll go for last year's winners, Lille. I feel, they've lost their keeper and Samare to Leicester. But it could have been worse. They could have been kind of, with the financial issues in France at the minute in the League, they could have been taken to the cleaners a little bit more than that. And, it's not the biggest win of the season, but they won the Community Shield, the French Community Shield, over PSG the other day. And, they still have a lot of the core of the squad that just won the title. So, for me, without PSG, they would be the ones to go with.
I'm going to go in the top 3 markets. So there's 3 spots available in Champions League. So it's effectively to qualify for the Champions League. I think that there might be an upset in this one because Marseille have brought in a lot of loan players, sort of Guendouzi. I never really fancy it when teams bring in a lot of loan players. You've got to be very careful with that. I think that Lyon are sort of selling the crown jewels at the moment, so I don't really fancy them. I disagree with Joe on Lille. I just wonder whether you can sort of repeat that trick 1 year on. I respect Monaco, it's a long way around the houses to say that I think that Nice and Rennes are two teams that could go really well this season, particularly Nice, because Gaultier, the coach from Lille, has moved there. They've signed Justin Kluivert and also Stengs from the Eredivisie. So them two will be either side of Kasper Dolberg, who had a brilliant Euros when he played for Denmark. So they're an ambitious team. They were really upset with the way that Vieira ran the show last year. I think that they've got, the high expectations really to be challenging for Champions League. And Rennes, most teams in France can't spend money because there was a collapse of a TV deal. Rennes have spent 30 million, and they've also got Doku, who at the Euros, I think, for Belgium, just showed glimpses of why people think he might be one of the sort of the next best big things in Belgian football. So them two might be able to upset the apple cart there.
Okay, interesting. And any other tips or bets across Europe then?
I would say it's quite tricky. No. I think might have to end it there.
No. Joe, any from you?
No.
Okay, right. Well, is there, I'm going to put you under pressure a little bit, one tip that you're most confident on then this season?
Mine would be Watford, lowest scoring team in the Premier League.
Oof, okay.
I think for me, it's Burnley to be relegated. I think that I think there's some big pressure on Sean Dyche this season.
Interesting. Okay, guys, thank you so much, Mark, Joe, and of course to Didi. And thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to the Racing Post YouTube channel. And please remember to always gamble responsibly.